All right, this is the beginning of Unit 2, and you see the title here, Progressive Movement, and you see the root word progress. So I want you to remember that people who were part of the progressive movement were people who wanted to make progress from problems that our country was facing. A lot of the problems that you studied in Unit 1, problems that came with social issues, immigration, urbanization, and industrialization, the westward expansion, some of those problems that were a result of that, the attempt to correct those or to improve the situations became known as the progressive movement. The idea was to make progress. So, some progressive political reforms included direct democracy. Direct democracy made democracy more, put it more in the hands of the people. So an initiative allowed citizens to propose legislation and vote directly on whether to pass it into law. A referendum allowed voters to vote whether to approve or reject a law passed by a legislative body. Direct election of senators meant that we would actually vote. We, the voters, would actually choose. We would elect our senators. There were municipal reforms on the local level, public health programs. During Teddy Roosevelt's presidency, and by the way, he was a progressive president. He was known as a progressive president. During his presidency, we saw the Food and Drug Administration created. We saw reforms with railroads and the opening of new national parks and forests. So I mentioned that Teddy Roosevelt was the progressive president. So this is a political promotion for him. It says the Progressive Party, he was part of that, pass prosperity around, share it. 1912, the 1912 campaign. And this was a receipt that you would get if you contributed $1 to his campaign fund. So the rise of the progressive movement, again, making progress, trying to move things forward and improving situations. The populist part of this focused on problems with farmers. You see the word farm here, rural. Remember that rural means farms. So populists focused on problems in rural America. Other reformers focused on problems in the cities. Rural and urban, remember, are opposites. Farm and city are opposites. So those who focused on problems in the cities were called progressives. These people accepted modern life. They accepted the rise of large corporations, big cities, and immigration, but they wanted to reform America or change, reform, redo, make it better by placing rules on the capitalist system and in the idea of laissez-faire government. It really wasn't a single unified movement, but a collection of movements focused on different political, social, and economic issues, and sometimes they disagreed with each other. Teddy Roosevelt, part of his campaign, part of his program was known as New Nationalism. He believed in an activist government that was a steward of the public welfare. It was very different from the laissez-faire past. New nationalism goals included conservation of natural resources, business reform, inheritance and income taxes, improving working conditions for women and children, workmen's compensation. In 1902, Roosevelt used the Sherman Antitrust Act to break up the Northern Securities Company, which was a large combination of railroads. So he gained the reputation as a trust buster, of busting that up. This act, the Hepburn Act, set maximum railroad rates. The Pure Food and Drug Act was the first law regulating food and drugs. It required labels with ingredients. And the Meat Inspection Act made it a crime to change or misbrand meat, and it ensured sanitary conditions. Woodrow Wilson was another president during this time period following Teddy Roosevelt, and Woodrow Wilson's program was known as New Freedom. He hoped to provide effective government responses to social and economic issues. A Federal Reserve Act was established that aimed to reform the banking system. It created the Federal Reserve System. The 16th Amendment was enacted that brought an income tax. President Wilson got a graduated income tax. The Clayton Antitrust Act and Federal Trade Commission Acts were also passed. The Keating-Owing Act was a federal restriction on child labor. During this time, reformers were often part of what was known as the social gospel. Many churches had begun to cater to the wealthy, and they supported ideas of laissez-faire and social Darwinism. Religious reformers believed in the social gospel. In other words, Christians should apply their faith and apply their work to solve society's problems. Instead of laissez-faire meant to leave things alone. So this would have been to say, this would have said, no, don't leave things alone, but do something to make it better. Salvation Army was an organization that came about during this time, provided food and shelter to the poor in cities. Settlement houses were built in poor neighborhoods and provided education, nutritional aid, healthcare, home economics, English lessons to immigrants, help people find jobs. This lady, Jane Addams, was the most famous member of this movement, the settlement movement, and her home that she created was called Hull House. Hull House was the settlement house that she created in Chicago. Muckrakers were journalists who exposed corruption in business. Muck means mud. So if you were a muckraker, you were stirring things up with a reason. You had a motive. This little quote, the pen is mightier than the sword. You can use your words to change things. You can use your words to make things better. Ida Tarbell was a woman who wrote about Standard Oil and talked about Rockefeller and some of the cutthroat methods that he had used in his corporation. Jacob Riis exposed living conditions in the tenement for women and children. Upton Sinclair exposed dirty conditions in the meatpacking industry. Photography was used, as well as words were used to expose things that needed to be changed. And some people view Michael Moore as a modern day muckraker. Florence Kelley was a progressive who convinced states to abolish child labor, which is why you're able to be in school today. Again, Jane Addams worked with the community centers, settlement houses to offer social services, and her organization, the home she used was called Hull House. The house she created was called Hull House. Ida Tarbell is the woman who investigated the history. She wrote the history of Standard Oil, so she was using investigative journalism to expose those practices. During the turn of the 20th century, around the year 1900, what was the status of women? Well, the idea was a woman's place is in the home. And there were separate ideas here. One was that the public world was dirty, full of work and politics, and women didn't need to be a part of that. They should stay home. They should stay and work on the domestic front, take care of children in their home. But there were some women that worked to bring us the right to vote. I say us because obviously I fall into this category, and I wouldn't have the right to vote. Ladies, we wouldn't have the right to vote but for these women. Susan B. Anthony used civil disobedience, the idea of using nonviolent to disobey a law in a nonviolent way to bring attention to something that might need to be changed. Alice Paul led the National Women's Party. She spent time in England helping to get the right to vote for women there. She also used militant nonviolent tactics. Carrie Chapman Catt worked with the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Her idea was to state by state, okay, to have each individual state gain the right to vote for women, and it would continue to spread. So remember that suffrage, this word suffrage, means the right to vote. It means the right to vote. And we were talking in this time period about the right to vote for women. The suffrage movement ended by the passage of the 19th Amendment on August 26, 1920. 36 states ratified it. You see the map here. And if you look real closely here, you can see that the orange is showing equal suffrage, and it shows the year it was adopted. The yellow states have partial suffrage for women, so that's where Texas fell. And the states that were green had no statewide suffrage for women. And these are some more photographs from that time period of the suffrage. Well, they were called suffragettes, the women who worked for suffrage. All right. Thank you for giving me your attention, and I hope this will help you a little bit as you learn and study about the progressive movement.